Greetings, citizens, and thanks for tuning in to Nindie Nation Episode 80. I'm Jeff, and if you're new here, welcome to your one-stop weekly shop for everything independently developed for the Nintendo Switch. This week, we're taking a quick look at every indie game releasing for the Switch from August 29th through September 4th, and after that, we'll find the best Nindie deals available to help you find just the thing to keep your Joy-Cons synced. Nindie Nation posts to podcast feeds and YouTube on Tuesday, and we're brought to you by our friends at the Nintendo Village, your home for everything Nintendo. So go check them out at thenintendovillage.com. Thanks to everyone watching on YouTube for helping us blow past 500 subscribers. If you're one of the 45% who watch but haven't subscribed, please consider doing so. Check out the Let's Plays and Nindies We Love videos, and here's to the next 500. Don't forget to chat with us in the comments or on Twitter at Nindie Nation, and every Thursday night around 10 p.m. Eastern, you can catch the Nindies at Night stream right on the Nindie Nation YouTube channel. This week's stream will be covering 2 Nindie trifectas coming to the Switch later this year as I give you a taste of Hades and Scourgebringer, 2 games that you will not want to miss. Anyways, we've got a lot to cover today, so let's get into the games. As you know, every week we see a few games drop without warning, and this week actually contains some of the best entries we've ever seen, with some truly high-quality games you won't want to miss. So with that said, let's kick off episode 80 by taking a quick look at the 7 neglected Nindies released since episode 79. If you're like me, a gamer of a certain age, you may have grown up around N64.com, which eventually turned into IGN. Back then, the website was run by a few guys, Per Schneider, who still runs things at IGN, a couple others, and Matt Casamassina, a man I credit with one of the main reasons I love talking about games so much. After leaving IGN, Matt worked at Apple to help cultivate games for the App Store right when it launched, and is now working at a publisher called Rogue Games, who has recently brought Nintendo of America's former president, Reggie Fils-Aimé, onto the board. All of that to say that last week, Rogue Games published their first Switch title, Glitch's Trip by Ransacked Studios for $12.99. The game is a pretty traditional side-scrolling action platformer with a really vivid neon-infused art style about a little glitch working his way through a bunch of moons. It adds some twin-stick shooting into the mix and overall looks pretty fun with a ton of levels, environments, and multiple difficulty levels. Yeah, actually, the more I look into this, Glitch's Trip looks like a lot of fun. West of Dead was shown off at the March Indie World presentation, and you might remember its isometric Western meets undead art style that is very dark and uses cel shading to a very powerful extent. I'm really surprised it launched last week with no fanfare, because this title by Raw Fury and Upstream Arcade is a very well-made roguelike that stands out among the crowd. I spent a good amount of time with West of Dead through Xbox Game Pass on PC, and found that what makes it different is the deliberate cover-based combat, which is much slower and precise than any of the other twin-stick roguelikes I've played. Otherwise, you get the standard layout with temporary and permanent perks to unlock, and an interesting Western-themed story about purgatory that unfolds throughout. West of Dead comes recommended by Nindie Nation and launches with a 20% discount for $15.99. Just know that this is a tougher, slower approach than you're probably used to. And Devolver Digital launched a new title from Moonkid that we saw briefly during their recent presentation. Witch Eye is a colorful, retro-styled platform adventure where you control a magical flying eyeball in a fantasy-themed world. Since it's a platformer and you can fly, there's an interesting control scheme that will take some getting used to, but also includes an optional touchscreen mode that reminds me of the Kirby Rainbow Curse and Canvas Curse games. At only $4 and developed by a team who has been building games since the original Nintendo, there's a lot to like with Witch Eye. And yet another highly anticipated indie that didn't get too much PR love last week is dropping quicker than we expected when Hello Games, the creators of No Man's Sky, released The Last Campfire for $14.99. This is a narrative puzzle adventure in a storybook-stylized world reminiscent of Ori and the Blind Forest, but plays out a bit more like a traditional Zelda game in terms of the puzzles. It looks like a brief, emotional story with thoughtful puzzles to solve from a team who, in my opinion, has really proven themselves as an indie studio that is here for the long haul. With those 4 games being a great fit for the right type of gamer, and frankly, all of them looking good enough for just about anyone, there's still 3 more games that dropped, and again, I'm not sure if any of these are necessarily Nindie no-nos. They aren't blatant cash grabs or anything, but I'm not sure if any of these are going to exactly top anyone's list for pick of the week. Hardcore Maze Cube is this week's cheap puzzle game by Cubite for 87 cents and is a really creepy, dark, top-down maze game. I can't say that we see too many of these, and the way they add in some platforming type abilities and secrets to uncover is pretty cool. I could see myself picking this one up if it didn't have such a haunting art style, but this game by Yaw Studios might be a decent cheap pickup for the right person. And I have to assume that Gemini Arms is the first release by Terrarin Games, or is just another overall bland release by the new Nindie mainstay publisher Deco. Gemini Arms is a shmup based around the mech transformer Gundam type things that includes side-scrolling and vertically scrolling modes, which is cool, but the game just looks so generic that it's hard to recommend it at its current price of $9.49. Bring It to Mom is not what it sounds like. Well, I guess I don't know what that title should sound like, but this one is a colorful, challenging platformer where you play as a little Pac-Man lookalike and traverse a bunch of rooms with all kinds of traps and enemies. This is developed by In-City and published by Christoph Podsada, both of which I've never heard of. It's also usually $20 and launched last week for $14, but at either of those prices, I just don't see this being a tantalizing proposition. Regardless, I'm amazed at the quality of neglected Nindies this week. West of Dead and The Last Campfire especially being games that received a lot of buzz and then just trickled out with little more than a tweet. And then there's the almost complete lack of Nindie no-nos, although I think maybe those publishers just finally got the memo to get their games in the usual scheduled rundown, which is good because it gives us a bit of comedic relief in between all of the new releases. Speaking of which, we've got 21 games releasing over the next week with a couple of good picks, but if I'm being honest here, we're definitely seeing another indie world hangover this week. So let me know if any of the neglected Nindies stood out for you in the YouTube comments or on Twitter at Nindie Nation. Now, let's take a look at all of the new release Nindies hitting the eShop from August 29th through September 4th. On August 29th, Glaive Games and Overgames with a Z released the single title that day with Collapsed for $15 even. This one reminds me a lot of Fury Unleashed, but with a more medieval fantasy theme. A side-scrolling action platformer with twin-stick shooting and melee attacks that just happens to include procedurally generated levels, roguelike mechanics, and RPG elements. Collapsed looks pretty cool, but it comes from a pretty unknown team and a publisher who has a spotty track record, so maybe wait for reviews on this one. Either way, nice to start the week off with a Nindie trifecta, huh? On August 31st, we get Pocket Circuit by Ludos Labs and Ultimate Games for $3.99. The large buttons and star ratings make this feel like a mobile port, but otherwise it is a low-poly isometric racer that looks very simple and limited in scope. But it might be fun for a few minutes or with the kids. The team at Xing and Modus Games kick off September with the only title releasing on Tuesday, September 1st, but an interesting one at that, with Ari and the Secret of Seasons for $39.99. This is a third-person 3D adventure game with a lot of influence from games like Breath of the Wild, where the core puzzle-solving and combat mechanic is your ability to change the seasons. The environments are bright and varied, the combat seems fluid and fun. Ari is pretty pricey, but it looks like a decent title and has won its fair share of indie awards. On Wednesday, September 2nd, 2 titles hit the eShop, with the first from Mighty Games and Hipster Whale, who developed the excellent Pac-Man 256 and Crossy Road. Similarly, their new Switch port is another quirky take on a classic with Piffle, a cat puzzle adventure for $14. This is a mobile port of their Bust-A-Move clone where you aim little cats at a block of various colored cats, match the pieces, you get it. I trust that the game is pretty fun given the developer's pedigree, but even on sale for $14, the Switch tax is just too high for a game that's only a couple of bucks on mobile. The other title releasing on September 2nd is Mask of Mists from Sometimes You for $11.99. With a high fantasy theme, Mask of Mists is a first-person action-adventure game with combat that would look familiar to people who play any first-person dungeon crawlers like the Elder Scrolls games. Don't think this is going to be near the same caliber though, because while the frame of the game is built around beloved titles, it otherwise seems somewhat unimpressive. And keeping with the theme of an indie world hangover, where usually the week or two after a big Nintendo-sponsored indie presentation, we see the eShop a little lighter than usual, we're at the big Thursday drop already, and this week there's only 7 games. We kick off the drop with Here Be Dragons by Red Zero Games for $17.99, and I think this game looks hilarious. The premise is that you guide Christopher Columbus and his crew across the sea to find the New World, but there's 2 catches. 1, the entire ocean is filled with dragons, monsters, and all kinds of pirate-themed seafaring creatures, and the other is that the whole game looks and plays out on an old-timey map. There's a great level of charm in this turn-based pirate strategy game, and it really seems to have a great time with its silliness and humor. I love games like this, and I think Here Be Dragons looks like a really fun pick for anyone looking for a light-hearted, turn-based strategy this week. And next up is Gang Beasts. This physics-based multiplayer brawler is an absolute... Wait, this isn't Gang Beasts. I mean, it is, but it looks significantly crappier. What is this? Jelly Champs? Who is this by? Really? Art Games Studio? A studio with art in their title releases one of the most blatant ripoffs I've ever seen on the eShop. And believe me, that's saying something. Jelly Champs is what happens when the jock in biology keeps asking you to do their homework and you refuse, so they just steal it and they don't even try to make it look like it wasn't their work, and it's $9.59. Gross. Art Game Studio? Go sit in the Nindie penalty box. For a different and decidedly less unique type of pirate game, you can check out Hero Craft's Under the Jolly Roger for $15.99, but I gotta warn you. If you watch the trailer, you'll see claims of building a world, customizing ships, and all kinds of battles, but what you won't see is any kind of interface or actual gameplay telling you how any of this pans out. Wait until the last couple seconds of the trailer and you'll see a generic pirate hitting skeletons with a sword in the third person, but that's about it. I think Under the Jolly Roger is one of those games that mixes various genres, but it claims to do multiplayer. I mean, it claims to do a lot. I'm just not seeing how it actually does those things, so it's hard to recommend, especially when there's already a much more clever way to be a pirate this week. At first glance, Spinch would have been much more fitting if it didn't release on September 3rd, but rather 136 days beforehand. Go ahead, I'll give you a second, you can Google it. It started as a project between Queen Bee Games and Canadian artist Jesse Jacobs in 2018, and this psychedelic side-scrolling platformer is releasing on Switch this week and carries a style all its own. If you like trippy visuals or platformers that can be enjoyed at multiple difficulties or speedrun them all the way through, there's no denying that Spinch stands out from the bunch, and at only $13.49, it could be worth giving a look. Good Pizza, Great Pizza is a pizza restaurant simulator by PM Studios for $8, and it's gonna let you pretend you run a pizza shop in an animated world that carries a tone more like an adult-focused cartoon. I'd run through all the features here, but I think that was probably enough information to know if this is a game you'll be putting on your wish list. Up next on the 3rd is the type of game I don't know if I've ever seen earn the distinct pleasure of being a Nindie trifecta. Niche is a turn-based strategy game where you play as a small creature of some sort, and you're sent to an island and must survive and thrive. It does this with procedurally generated levels, roguelike mechanics, and RPG elements. It's an interesting premise for sure. If you'd like to take a jaunt through this animal species-based survival game, it'll set you back $17.99. And the last release for September 3rd's not-so-big Thursday drop is... Look, I'm falling right into the marketing trap here, and I'm taking all of you with me, but you gotta go look at the page on Nintendo's site for Connection Haunted. Their landing page is devoid of any real information, and the description has all kinds of calls for help written in code and ASCII. It's pretty clever. The game is made by No Gravity and is a $4 first-person shooter that looks modern but runs in a super glitchy, low-resolution style. It's dark and spooky and looks like it mimics an online multiplayer shooter, but it's a single-player affair. I have no idea if this game is any good, and other than some spooky imagery and super clever marketing, I can't really tell what's going on here, but I definitely applaud their effort. And if this kind of augmented fourth wall breaking game is up your alley, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how it is in the YouTube comments or on Twitter at Nindie Nation. Rounding out the week on Friday, September 4th are 7 Nindies vying for a piece of your weekend, starting with Fantasy Tower Defense by Prison Games for $3.74. Prison Games, huh? I tried to research this developer, but frankly, searching for prison games on Google turns up a bunch of prison simulators like Prison Architect or the Escapists games, and a bunch of stuff about developers who went to prison. So I don't have much to go off of with this team. The game, however, as the name suggests, is a tower defense game with a cartoony fantasy theme. It looks a lot like the original Pixel Junk Monsters, which I consider a great thing, but with no track record to go off of and very little information about the game itself, you might want to wait for reviews or check out the real Pixel Junk Monsters series if you're looking for a tower defense fix. Batu II is yet another cheap, simple, relaxing tile-sliding puzzle game, this time by 2 Awesome Studio. It's $3.99 and I seriously cannot tell any of these games apart anymore. The next title, though, is by Ant Workshop, who has developed and published a couple of solid Nindies, including Dead End Job, Subsurface Circular, and The Swindle. Their newest release, Lair of the Clockwork God, is a funny, witty romp through the apocalypse with 2 self-professed idiots that each bring their own genre to the title. With half of the game playing out like a point-and-click adventure and the other half as an action platformer and witty banter throughout, Lair of the Clockwork God could be a fun way to experience the apocalypse all on your own, and you can check it out for $16.99 this week. Hook Games has yet another minimal effort card game with Solitaire Spider Minimal for 69 cents. Yep. Flying Squirrel Games publishes Dirt Trackin' 2 for $5.99, which is a very low-budget game about driving cars around a dirty circle. And Rattalika's release this week is a fun twist on their typical visual novel with the college, dating, and life simulator Roommates for $19.99. I gotta say, it's nice to see a fully featured visual novel that both includes more interactivity and decision-making, as well as an almost complete lack of scantily clad underage anime schoolgirls. In this game, they are actually mostly clothed and are in college, so good on you, Rattalika. This one looks funny and interesting. And the game wrapping up this week of new Nindie releases is for all of you detectives out there, as Fellow Traveler releases Paradise Killer for $15.99. This decidedly mature first-person whodunit has you exploring an open-world island full of over-the-top personalities searching for the titular Paradise Killer. Beyond the investigation, interrogation, and exploration, there's also a boatload of puzzles to keep you busy, and as far as my untrained eye can see, Paradise Killer looks like one of the better entries in this genre we've seen in a while, probably since, Murder by Numbers. What do you think? Piffle looks like a cool puzzle game, and I'm definitely curious about Collapsed. I like the insane style of Spinch, and there's no denying the charm that Here Be Dragons brings to the tried-and-true RTS formula. But if we're including the neglected Nindies, I think our pick of the week goes to either West of Dead or Glitch's Trip, depending on if you want something dark and challenging, or vivid and fast-paced. Let me know what's piquing your interest this week in the YouTube comments or on Twitter at Nindie Nation. If none of those games are jumping out at you this week, that's okay too, because there are currently a cool 900 games on sale over at the eShop, and it's our job to help you decide which of those deals are worth your hard-earned digital dollars. So with that, let's check out the Nindie Nation picks for the best Nindie deals available through at least September 4th. It's been a while, but the entire Steamworld franchise is back on sale, and if you've never played any of these, now is the time to jump in. Steamworld Dig is 75% off for $2.49, but I'd only say play this one if you've played the rest and you want to see the series' roots. Great game, but all of the rest are better. Steamworld Dig 2, on the other hand, is one of the best Nindies on the Switch. It's essentially a Metroidvania roguelike built around the premise of digging down to the core of the earth, and it's a stellar title you can experience in under 10 hours. Steamworld Dig 2 is 60% off for only $7.99. Steamworld Heist is a whole nother animal. Proving that they can master multiple genres, Image & Form made this sequel a side-scrolling, turn-based strategy game. There's not much else to compare it to, but I held off on this game for a long time, and when I finally bought it, I couldn't put it down. If you've played the Dig games, don't sleep on Heist while it's 75% off for only $5. And Steamworld Quest, the deck-building RPG, is finally at what I think is the perfect price. Half off for only $12.49. This is one of the better modern JRPG-style games out there, and the deck/card system is very light, so don't let that turn you off. In fact, it's probably a great entry point if you love JRPGs but you've never played one with a card system. The humor and polish in this game, as well as the whole series, is just top-notch, and $12.49 is the perfect price. Hyper Light Drifter is a game that many people will tell you is one of their favorites. It plays kind of like a faster-paced Zelda in combat, but a slower-paced Zelda in exploration, all around a crazy, cool sci-fi aesthetic. If you're in the mood for some serious sci-fi and awesome puzzle solving, 45% off at $10.99 is a great price for Hyper Light Drifter. Donut County is currently only $3.89, which is 70% off, and I really can't think of a better recommendation for a way to spend 2 hours of your time. The gameplay is unique, never too hard, the story is clever and fun, the music is excellent, and there's a little bit of replay value after the credits roll. Donut County is one that I'm comfortable in saying just buy it, trust me, and I rarely do that. What Remains of Edith Finch is the winner of multiple Game of the Year awards as one of the most haunting and intriguing narrative adventures around. If you want to explore the mystery of a home where family members keep dying in mysterious ways, check this one out for $8 while it's 60% off. Hey, you like Stardew Valley, kid? Yeah? Okay, your next game is My Time at Portia. It's a little more cartoony, a little nicer graphics, a little lighter on the overall package, but these two games have a lot in common. And for only $10.99, 66% off should make My Time at Portia very enticing, but act quick because this one is only on sale until September 3rd. Outbuddies DX is a really bad name for one of the better Metroidvania games on the Switch. It's fairly new and flew way under the radar, including my own, but after spending some time with it myself and talking to a couple different sources who offered glowing reviews, I'm comfortable in recommending it while it's half off for $8.99. Now, it's not a huge discount, but Inti Creates rarely discounts their games, and their brand new Bloodstained Curse of the Moon 2 is currently 20% off for $11.99. If you like Castlevania games or these slower-paced action platformers of yesteryear, there's no denying the quality in this sequel that greatly expands on the original and includes more than 3 full campaigns to play through. At $12, you'll definitely get your money's worth out of this one. Here's a Nindie for the Souls fans out there. Blasphemous is a mix of 2D exploration platforming, similar to Castlevania, and the cinematic animation plus dodge mechanic of the Souls games. There's a demo if you want to try it out for yourself. I did. I loved it. I was ready to go buy it. Then it got too hard. I suck. I deleted it. You can relive my nightmare or show me how much better you are than I for half off or $12.49. And this is another one that is only live until September 3rd. And finally, for this week's deals, we have a game that, shoot, I think anyone who can get swept up in the whimsy or emotion of a game should absolutely play, and that is Ori and the Blind Forest. This game is just a masterpiece, and probably the best Metroidvania out there. Sorry, Hollow Knight. Whereas Hollow Knight is all about the combat, Ori is all about the acrobatic platforming, but there's still plenty of combat too. This is just a wonderful game that I slept on until just last year, and good lord was I missing out. It's only 30% off, which isn't huge, but if you're like me, don't keep missing out. Pick it up now. $13.99 is a steal for this experience. And that's it. Anything you're picking up this week? Let me know on Twitter at Nindie Nation, and as always, I'm checking out the YouTube comments throughout the week. Before we go, as part of the weekly rotating segment, we'll take a quick jaunt through my own world of Nindies and a few games I wanted to make sure and share with you. The first two we're going to cover are a part of last week's Nindies at Night, so don't forget to check out the streams if you want to see more. Here's what's been keeping my Joy-Cons synced. Earth Knight, at its core, is an endless runner similar to Runner 2 or Runner 3. You run left to right, you jump over things, bounce off of things, and basically try to stay in the air for as long as you can, soaring as high as possible, and it's really fun. Why I love this game though is the presentation, which is like a storybook art style and an incredible chiptune soundtrack. I picked up Earth Knight when it was on sale for $7.50, and I think that's a perfect price for it. The other game that was played on Nindies at Night last week, Hunt Down, is a very simple game. It's a side-scrolling action platformer. No leveling, no gimmicks, just really good action platforming with 3 cyberpunk characters in a cyberpunk world, taking out cyberpunk bad guys. Each level is unique and has a super cool boss, and the whole thing looks, feels, and sounds like an 80s action movie. I was a bit lukewarm on it at first just because of the difficulty and simplicity, but once I got the hang of it, I was hooked. Just like Earth Knight, this one was also on sale for $7.50, and at that price, I think it's worth it. Last week, I talked about Jets and Guns 2, the bombastic side-scrolling shoot-'em-up with procedurally generated levels, roguelike mechanics, and RPG elements. And while I think the difficulty is a bit unbalanced, I've really enjoyed my time with it. I think it's $12 right now, and that might be a bit too much, but at $10 or $7, if you're like me and you've been looking for a side-scrolling shmup to get lost in, this is a great option. As you may know, I play a lot of Nindies on PC. That's either because they're a part of Xbox Game Pass or because I can get early access to the Nindies before they become, well, Nindies. And that's the case for Rogue Legacy 2. This is the sequel to one of the original Nindie trifectas, and it's definitely coming to the Switch, but when? Who knows? The sequel launched on PC Early Access last week, and I have been completely absorbed in it. In fact, I've already completed it and maxed it out. There's a bunch of classes to play as, and each time you start a level, you're inflicted with some type of hereditary gene. You can pick from one of 3 randomly created characters, so you're not always stuck with a serious debilitation, but they could range from being colorblind to seeing the world upside down, or dying in one hit, or even just passing gas, which doesn't seem to really have much of an impact. The more of a negative impact the effects do have, though, the more gold you earn for playing in that class. It's awesome, it looks great, it plays great, and Rogue Legacy 2 is going to be a must-buy Nindie whenever it releases. And of course, it is a side-scrolling platformer set inside an ever-changing castle with procedurally generated levels, rogue-like mechanics, and RPG elements. What about you, though? What are you playing? That's the rotating topic for next week. I want to know what's been keeping your Joy-Cons synced that you think we should talk about on the show. Let me know in the YouTube comments or on Twitter at Nindie Nation, and I'll read a few next week. Other than that, don't forget to check out the YouTube channel where you can see each episode as it posts every Tuesday, in addition to Let's Plays and the new Nindies at Night series of live streams. If you want to join us for one of those streams, you can set your notifications now and see the placeholder for this week's episode, which will cover Hades and Scourgebringer, 2 Nindie trifectas coming later this year, which I'll be playing through some mid to late game runs of on Thursday night, right on the Nindie Nation YouTube channel at 10 p.m. Eastern. If you got your fill of Nindies but want some more Nintendo goodness, go check out our friends at the Nintendo Village, where they're pumping out daily articles, reviews, features, podcasts, and shows just like this one. You can find everything they do over at thenintendovillage.com, and we thank them for their support. And thanks to everyone who has liked and subscribed to the Nindie Nation YouTube channel. Last week we hit 500 subscribers, and that just makes me so happy. So thank you to all of you who actually enjoy listening to me blab about video games. That's it for this week, citizens. Next week we've got a highly anticipated rhythm game, and a game that just might end up being the Smash Brothers of Nindies. Can it deliver? We'll just have to wait and see, because that's all for next week. So until then, I'm Jeff. This has been Nindie Nation episode 80, and no matter what kind of game you're looking for, we'll be right here to help you find just the thing to keep your Joy-Cons synced.